Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm here with Titus Ammon, who's the Northeast Regional Field Services Manager here at L&D. Thank you again, Titus, so much for meeting with me today.
Well, good morning. Yes, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and I know you've had a particularly very interesting career, and your transition into L&D in the engineering and energy industry is very different from what you were doing before. So I'm excited to ask you more questions about that and how you made the career change. But my first leading question for you is from your prior career in the Navy to now in field services at L&D. What drew you to the energy and engineering industry since it's so different than what you were doing in the Navy?
Yeah, absolutely. In the Navy, I was leading a lot of different people, but really I started fundamentally in the electrical industry, working on the nuclear powered carriers and working in the propulsion plant and doing maintenance and service on a lot of that, what we considered high voltage, but turns out is just medium voltage equipment. So I was just already very familiar with that and also very familiar with supervising people and interacting with all kinds of different people and other contractors and companies. So it's nice to be on the other side.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you have a very important and critical role with a lot of our public works projects, especially in the state of New York. Can you tell, for people who are not familiar, can you tell a little bit more about the types of projects that entails and like what you typically worked on?
Absolutely. So here in the Northeast, we have a lot of different contracts. We're working with a lot of New York State organizations, whether that's hospitals and Office of Mental Health or in other government facilities out here. We also have worked at some other college campuses and all kinds of different areas throughout the state and the Northeast region.
Yeah, very fascinating. And as a native New Yorker myself, it's so cool to see New York always at like the top of the investment into like engineering and renewables, using energy, things like that. So as your previous career as a leading chief petty officer in the Navy, you're responsible for a lot of technical excellence. How do you create that same level of precision and preparedness managing your current team at Elm?
Yeah, thank you. So for me, it's building that questioning attitude, trying to get people to question the whys behind everything, making sure they understand why it is it's important that we do the maintenance and why it's important that we do even the mundane tasks of cleaning something, making sure that everybody understands that. Focusing on the basics is really important because if everybody understands those basics, they'll be able to do that when nobody else is around. And then just for me, it's a quote that I've been told and said many times is, well, what does a book say? Not accepting everybody just asking for an answer, but asking for where to find the answer and having them show it to you so they can see it and understand it. And watching people grow in that respect is very rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. I know like we place a very high value on really good leadership at L&D, and you're a great example of that, leading the team. And I know like especially your work, it can have a lot of time sensitive and like high pressure type of situations, especially with L&D caring a lot about the safety of our employees and proper PPE and all those things. How do you typically instill in your team the importance of safety and all these things at work, while also your role is very customer facing at the same time?
Being transparent and honest with all parties involved is very important. So making sure the customer knows that it is a time constraint. They are giving us constraints that are difficult to adhere to is important. Also making sure that the team knows what all those constraints are. And also I like to point out where it would be easy for us to cut corners, which sounds counterproductive, but I like to point it out, make it obvious, make it known to everybody involved that, hey, we're going to look out for this. It makes it easier for us to prevent us from doing that and takes it out of those dark corners, puts it in the bright light, make sure everybody can see it, know it, and make sure that we're not cutting those corners and just making sure the expectations are clear to my team as well as the customer, and understanding that those deadlines make difficulties and make it harder for all parties to do the job.
Definitely. I hear you. And I know you work with a lot of complex projects, especially working with modernizing and updating electric grids right now. What would you say has been the biggest challenge that utilities today face in the Northeast?
I think aging infrastructure is one of the biggest challenges, and for what I've also noticed is that aging out of the personnel. So the people that know how the equipment works, know how the aging infrastructure operates and is maintained, as they move on to either retirement or whatever the case is, that knowledge leaves with them. So making sure that they have procedures and the knowledge to understand it. And sometimes that's where we come in, where we have to come in and help show them how their equipment works, show them what it's doing and why it does it so that they can rebuild that.
Yeah, I agree. I think more and more people should kind of like see the energy and engineering industry as a bigger opportunity in their career because it is growing so rapidly. So it's a really good point to point out. And when you are hiring maybe additional people for your team, are there any like qualities that you look for in new people?
Definitely. So what I look for is accountability in people, being able to follow through with things, being able to be accountable. And I expect them to hold me accountable to things that I'm doing as well. So, and then being able to identify ways of making everybody's job easier. So whether that's while on the facility or while at the job, seeing and anticipating what the next step's going to be to make sure that everything flows very smoothly is really important to me.
Definitely. And I know I think one of the hot topics of today's day and age is AI and how specifically automation and artificial intelligence is being integrated into all these systems. So do you see the energy industry kind of evolving in any specific areas that you work on relating to those things, or is it a very slow transition right now?
In the maintenance side, where we're typically working right now on the projects in the Northeast, I think it's more of a slow transition because we're working more with inside a inside a building's infrastructure, not the actual grid's infrastructure for a lot of the projects I'm working on. But as the AI helps with all of that, they're still going to need services to be able to provide to make sure that all of the monitoring equipment is operating correctly so that it can make the decisions that it needs to, or to make sure that all of the breakers and equipment are still functioning correctly. So honestly, I think it really helps with us and ensuring job security in the industry that we're in. So it actually helps for us.
It's a really good point. And I'm like really curious, is there any anecdote or story from your prior career in the Navy that influences how you manage your team today? Or how you approach your team management today?
Yes, thank you. So, as a young sailor, when I was, many years ago, first joined, I was very typical of the try to find the fastest way to do everything rather than trying to find, I don't want to say the right way, but essentially the right way. Making sure that knowing what the book says, understanding the whys behind everything. And for me, it was a chief that I worked for when I was very young. Would never answer a question directly, which seemed very counterproductive at the time, but he would only ever tell me where it said something and would never accept my answers unless I brought the book to him, showed him where the answer was, so that he felt confident that I was going to be able to operate. I took that throughout the rest of my career in the Navy and have brought that also with the team that I work with in L&D, which has been great.
Is there any book that a team member has brought to you, or just metaphorically showing you the answer?
As when I say books, I'm more meaning the specifications, whether it's working out of the, when somebody asks, what is the torque of a specific bolt? They see me just smile, know that I'm not going to give them the answer. Then he immediately goes to the NETA standard, pulls it out, finds the correct grade of bolt and the size, and then shows me the right answer. So it is a book, but it's not a fun book to read. It's just the specifications in most cases.
Okay, got it. But I love that you really are putting the responsibility on them to do the work to find the answer instead of you providing it immediately.
Definitely.
Awesome. Is there any, just like talking for comparing the two industries, is there anything you think that the energy and engineering industry can learn from the Navy industry side in terms of like discipline or work ethic or anything like that?
So I think that the adherence to maintenance is something that the industry, I think, could improve on. What I mean by that is adherence to the schedule of maintenance. There's sites and facilities that, will admit to say that it has been years since some of the stuff had the services that we're providing done to it. In the Navy, we would do most all of this stuff at least annually. I would take all of my grid down and be able to do all of the maintenance. And in fact, if I didn't do it, we had to explain the whys behind it. And all we were doing is postponing it. We would never cancel it. It would always be pushed a little bit farther. And then also just practicing. So the facilities or the grid in general in which it's hard to say this for the customers, but that for us as a customer who uses power at our home, but the willingness to allow the facilities to practice the switching procedures, the turning it off, pretend that things all went really wrong and that there's a massive catastrophe that's going on. Nobody wants to be willing to do that. And that was one of the things in the military that was very prevalent was we practice that type of stuff constantly so that when something goes wrong, because turns out we were trying to bring our electric power grid into the middle of a combat situation potentially, we were all prepared to be able to handle it without having to pull the books out, without having to ask 15 different people. And I think that some facilities, not necessarily to that strict of compliance, but could benefit from just practicing the switching procedures, or when they're doing a generator run for their monthly tests, simulating that the generator fails to start and seeing how their personnel would handle that situation so that they have the confidence in their people to be able to handle that as well.
I love that. All about preparedness and testing your team in a variety of situations.
Definitely.
Love that. And is there anything about LND's mission or values as a company that really motivated you to join the team?
So I didn't know a lot about the company when I initially joined, but I found a place that I definitely feel like I'm welcome and at home. I feel like I'm part of the team and that I have an impact, that when I have a suggestion or a thought, that it's considered, it is either utilized or discussed as to why not. And I feel that I'm wanted here, which has been very refreshing, which was something that I had with some of the small groups that I worked with within the Navy, but I definitely have that here as well.
You're definitely a highly valued member of the team, can confirm. And then for other veterans or for people even from other industries who are considering a role in field services, do you have any advice for people on how they can best make that transition, or anything they could do to kind of like prepare them for success in this type of role?
Yeah, so for one of the things I was very apprehensive about is the field services in general. The fact that it's a traveling job is very intimidating to a lot of service members. I would say specifically Navy is in my case, because that's what I did for the last 20 years. But travel for this is significantly different than it was for the Navy. It's not me packing up and leaving my family behind for 9 months. I'll be gone for a week and back for the weekend in many cases, or a day or two, or whatever the case is. I'm fortunate with where I'm traveling regionally, so in most cases I'm able to drive wherever I need to go, which is very nice. But also understand that for many of the veterans, you have a lot of knowledge in whether it's procedural compliance and making sure adherence to the rules and such like that, which is incredibly valuable to a lot of people. Just being able to decipher what's being seen in the schematics and such like that, and continuing to develop on that. But then also understanding that what we did in the Navy was a condensed version in some cases for some of the industry, especially in this industry. We didn't do all of the testing in the Navy, didn't do all the testing that we do at L&D. In fact, they would contract it out to companies like L&D to do some of that work. So seeing that other side of it and having an open mind and learning that has been tremendous.
So would you say your role in field services is more conducive for like work-life balance, flexibility with the family, things like that?
Most definitely. For me, my work-life balance has improved significantly because, again, I'm not gone for months and months at a time. I'm able to take the time that I need to be at home, and I'm not missing nearly as many things as I did with my kids, which is tremendous.
Awesome. Can you give us a brief background of your interesting career change?
Absolutely. So I started in the Navy in 2005. I joined as a nuclear operator. When you join the Navy as a nuclear operator, you don't know what you're going to join as. You just agree to the nuclear power plants, whether that's going to be on carriers or submarines. When I was in boot camp, that's when you get to, quote unquote, choose whether you want to be a mechanic, an electrician, or an electronics technician to decide where you're going to go. A lot of that's decided by the scores you get on different exams. But fortunately, I was selected to be an electrician. From there, I went to schooling in South Carolina, where the Navy has the nuclear pipeline, as we call it down there, where they teach you about electricity, the fundamentals of all of that, which has come in tremendous handy for understanding how things work outside of the Navy as well. And then they teach you about nuclear power, something I knew nothing about prior to joining the Navy. And I'm very grateful to understand how safe that industry is, and looking forward to hopefully having more nuclear power here in the United States, because it's been very safe operating there. From there, I was in Virginia. I was on a ship there for several years and had done a lot of work in the shipyards. That's where I started to see a lot more of the maintenance aspect of things. And then we did a major overhaul of that ship while I was on there. Then we came up to Charleston, South Carolina, where I got my first time where I got to actually teach. So once you've operated for a while, you're invited back to teach at some of the schoolhouses. The schoolhouses for us are very arduous. It's a 24-hour-a-day schedule that we have a rotating shift work. So it was a very difficult time, but it was very rewarding seeing the light bulb turn on proverbially in multiple people's heads, which was great. I really enjoyed that. Then I went back out to the West Coast, operated on one of the ships out there, really enjoyed my time up in the Pacific Northwest. Beautiful area. Highly encourage anybody to go up there if you have not. And then brought me up to upstate New York after that. I was in Saratoga Springs. My wife and I and my daughters really loved the area, so they stuck around over there while I finished up my tour in San Diego. I got to see that wonderful sunshine, but I was gone for all of that time. So it was very, very challenging there. During all of that time, my focus in the Navy was operations of the power plant, which again, I really enjoyed, but then also was the maintenance of all of the electrical equipment. Started out as a technician where I was doing all the work, and then gradually went up to the supervision side of things where I was helping schedule the maintenance, or then making sure all of my sailors were scheduling the maintenance and following through to make sure that everything was getting done correctly. One of the things I greatly appreciate that the nuclear Navy taught me was the process of finding out what went wrong, questioning things after somebody makes a mistake, trying to get down to the why behind things, an evolution that we called a critique, which is a painful thing to do at times, but it's asking all the questions of finding out why somebody made a mistake, primarily so we can learn from it and then not make that mistake again in the future, was one of the big things that I really enjoyed. After serving for 20 years, my daughters said they were ready for me to be home, so retired. And fortunately, I was able to find a position here at LND, and hopefully bringing some of that knowledge that I had there to the team that we have out here at the LND.
I love that. It sounds like from the outside, it sounds like an untraditional path. Everything that you learned throughout your journey kind of like uniquely prepared you for
Yeah.
LND. It's like, that's awesome. And this is me finding out that Virginia has shipyards. But you mentioned a lot about your knowledge and background in nuclear energy. And I know L&D is a very clean energy, renewables focused and forward company. What are your predictions for how clean energy and renewables will evolve over the next few years, especially in the Northeast region that you've seen?
So I see the green and renewable energies growing tremendously. I mean, just when you drive down the highway, you'll see the solar farms that are getting put up, which I think do help with a lot of that. I think with the amount of energy that we need, nuclear is going to be one of the ways it's going to help out with that. I think education of people, making sure they understand how it functions and how safe it is very important. But the nuclear industry as a whole in the United States has a tremendous safety record of open and honesty as far as when they make mistakes, like what I was talking about before, but also just the training pipeline and making sure that everybody fully understands and operates very safely and correctly.
I agree. A few members of the L&D team, when I asked them the same question, they've said the same thing about nuclear energy being kind of at the forefront. So it's cool to see your opinion on that. And then one of my last questions is, I know you mentioned your curiosity being very important and your love of learning and also teaching others being very essential qualities in preparing you for this role. Is there any other things that you think if someone is considering being in field services or engineering, they should definitely have these other two, either qualities or backgrounds in their education?
Education, not necessarily, but just being willing to learn. Like you said, curiosity is a big thing, but being willing to learn and try to understand.
The top two things you need, right? And one of my last things is, I know might have to keep it hush hush, but is there any other details you could tell us about an interesting or cool upcoming project that you're excited about working at L&D right now?
Yeah, so here in the Northeast region, we'll hopefully be looking for a few more employees to be working for us up here as we have some projects that are going to be picking up in the Northeast region where we'll have the opportunity to do a lot more maintenance and a lot more work and might require a little less travel for some people, which will be nice.
Nice. So L&D is hiring for anyone watching this, especially for Titus's team. So thank you again, Titus, so much for your very detailed background and for answering all these questions. And I feel like it's very uniquely valuable for people that are either veterans or have military service, which is also always a topic of interest for people. So thank you again so much. And if you have anyone watching this has any other questions for Titus or for me, please comment below. And thank you again, Titus, so much for joining me today.
Thank you.